Good morning and welcome again to Orphan Car Garage YouTube. My name is John. I'm the owner and operator of Orphan Car Garage, and we're located just out the great city of Boston in a little town called Abington. The car I'm going to present to you today is one of my favorite model vehicles. I saw my first one when I was about 12 years old from the school bus window in the very early 1980s, and it was instant love for me. And when I was 15, I bought my first one. And I've owned more of these than I can count over the years. So I'm pretty proficient in these cars, what to look for, what not to look for. So I love getting these in the shop. I love passing them on to people like me that have always appreciated them, or maybe just recently started to appreciate them, because there's a lot of people like that nowadays. These cars are really starting to come into their own. This one in particular is very desirable today. Just a little background: in 1962, Chevrolet entered the turbocharged game with the Monza Spider. They introduced that car a year earlier at one of the international auto shows, and it was an immediate success. So it was 1962 that they offered the turbocharged version of this car in the showroom, and it completely changed the trajectory of this particular model, which had originally started out to be basically a plain Jane four-door economy car, grocery getter, second car for a growing family type of vehicle. Of course, the Corvair we're talking about here. And the Corvair was introduced in 1960 along with the Ford Falcon over at Ford and the Plymouth Valiant over at Plymouth. They were all sort of small, economical sedans to compete with the influx of Japanese cars and German cars, the Volkswagen Beetle in particular, that were coming into the country and selling very, very well. And the big three didn't have a small economy car to offer, so they got working on new models, and Chevrolet got very daring with the Corvair introduction in 1960. And of course, we know the Corvair is quite unconventional compared to the Ford Falcon and the Plymouth Valiant. But in 1962, like I mentioned earlier, they introduced a turbocharged two-door coupe and convertible model of this car, and it really changed the whole direction of where the car went. The turbocharged two-door coupes really took off, convertibles as well, and then of course you could get a Monza without the turbo and a coupe and a convertible as well, and that seemed to be the niche of the car. It was really a poor man's Porsche, as they say. These cars were little sports cars in my mind, and they finally tapped into that market in the earlier 1960s, especially with the introduction of that turbocharger. Side note, Chevrolet would have been the first American production car with a turbocharged engine in the 1962 Corvair Spider, but the boys over at Oldsmobile caught wind of that and beat Chevrolet to the punch by, I think, about 2 months with their Jetfire, which was a V8 turbo car based on the F85 Cutlass. They beat the Corvair by 2 months to the market. But as we know, the Jetfire turbo, Oldsmobile turbo, required a lot of maintenance by the owner and didn't really take off to the extent that the turbocharger in the Corvair did, as that lasted well into 1966. But nonetheless, it was still a rare option for the Corvair. And here we have in front of us a 1965, beautiful 1965 coupe. This is a Corsa. 1965 saw a dramatic restyle in the Corvair. Erased any sort of issues that anybody had with any sort of tricky handling. I'm not going to mention anybody's name in particular or a book that they may have written, but by 1965, all those issues, or supposed issues, that we could argue about for days, were rectified with this beautiful redesign for 1965. This body style lasted through 1969 in dribs and drabs towards the end. Of course, this car fell out of favor once the introduction of the Camaro came into play by 1967, and Chevrolet and John DeLorean had become president of Chevrolet. The car had kind of become the redheaded stepchild by the end of the 60s. But in 1965, it was a huge hit. This particular car is a 1965, and sales really took off again for Corvair in 1965, and you can see why. It's just a beautiful, beautiful design, very European looking. I think this late model Corvair design bodes well even in today's traffic. I mean, this car looks like a modern day car. The designers of this car really hit it out of the park. This particular car is exceptionally stunning because of its color. This is a factory Danube blue color. A very deep, pretty blue. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful color on this car, or any Chevrolet for 1965. It was available across the line. But Corvairs in particular, I think it really sets off the beautiful architecture of the car, the beautiful styling. That thin C-pillar with the two-door hardtop design with the windows all rolled down. Just absolutely beautiful. I think the late model Corvair coupes is arguably one of the best looking cars to come out of the 1960s. And they're finally coming into their own. Thankfully, I've seen their value for decades. Now they're finally becoming something a lot of people are looking for. People are taking a second look at these cars, thank goodness. And this is the car people want. This is a Corsa coupe. The base car you could buy was a 500, and even the little 500 models are very pretty. They have the same body style as this, but they were more plain, bench seat, rubber floor mat, lower horsepower engines for the most part. Dog dish hubcaps, less trim, rocker panels, things like that. But then you could step up to the Monza, which is similar to the Corsa we have in front of us. The Monza added some nice trim, the bucket seats. You could get a 140 horsepower engine in those cars, and you could get a 4-speed manual floor shifted transmission in the Monza. Very nice little package in the Monza. But if that still wasn't good enough for you, you could step up to the one we have in front of us, and this is a Corsa. The Corsa was the top of the line Corvair for 1965. The same features that the Monza offered, with its bucket seats and fold down rear seat, nice door panels, but the Corsa added some extra niceties like that gauge package. You got a full gauge package with a tachometer and a head temperature gauge and a vacuum gauge. And of course, the Corsa was only available with a manual transmission, and this car, of course, is no different. This car is equipped with a 4-speed manual floor shifted transmission. Now, the standard engine in the Corsa for 1965 was that same engine that I mentioned earlier that you could buy in the Monza, the 140 horsepower 4-carburetor engine. Very potent little engine, 140 horsepower, moved this little car along nicely, especially with its 4-speed manual transmission. But if that still wasn't good enough for you, you could step up to a turbocharger. 180 horsepower to be exact, turbocharged engine. This engine was an option over and above the 140 horsepower engine that was standard on the Corsa. They built about 20,000 or so Corsa coupes, or Corsas in general, in 1965, which is a fairly small number compared to how many other Corvairs were built in 1965. So the Corsa is still considered kind of a rare model, although 20,000 is rather respectable. Even less of those, far less of those, were built with the optional turbocharged engine. Now, full disclosure, this car was born from the factory with that 140 horsepower 4-carburetor engine. A previous owner did a very thorough and thoughtful conversion to the turbocharged engine. Only a keen eye would know that this did not come out of the factory with a turbo. This came from the factory, again, with the 140 horsepower 4-carburetor engine, which is in itself very unique and very desirable. The turbo just adds even more desirability to it. How did I know that that was done? I decoded the data plate there, and there's a code in that data plate that tells you what engine was in this car when it was built. And the data plate doesn't lie. The data plate showed me that this car was born with a 140 horsepower engine. But when I first inspected this car, before I looked at the data plate, I was convinced it was a factory turbo car. One of the things that you can usually tell is a dead giveaway is the cutout. Only the turbos have this single exhaust out the right side rear valance. The 140 horsepowers had a dual exhaust that came out just under the quarter panel. Only the turbos got this cutout, and if you look at the cutout, it's perfectly done. Usually a dead giveaway when someone adds a turbo to one of these cars is that cutout is very haphazardly done, very crude. That is not crude at all. That's the first thing I looked at, and it looked factory to me. There's those Corsa only rear air grills that are in really good shape. A lot of times those get bent up and corroded. So you can see, once again, getting back to that, the cutout for that turbo exhaust is virtually perfect. They did everything right. It has the return line for the fuel. Real nice, professional, well done conversion. Now this car has been repainted, the original Danube blue by the code, and I wish that the painter had done a little bit more prep work. The paint on this car could have been done better, and it's frustrating for me because this car is so beautiful and so straight and so rust-free, unbelievably rust-free actually. One of the most rust-free Corvairs we've ever encountered. To cheapen out on the prep work and the paint is rather, and it's really, there's a little bit of a imperfection there. There's quite a few of those little imperfections on the paint, on the roof, and it's really frustrating to me that people cheapen out on a paint on such a beautiful car. I mean, I'll never understand why people do it, but it was done on this car. That could have been much better prep work done on this car before it was painted. Don't get me wrong, it's very presentable. 6 feet away, you wouldn't see a thing. The closer you get to the car, the more imperfections you may see. Some little runs, some little dimples. And if anyone's interested, I can send them more specific pictures. Some of them are very hard to see in camera. But that also makes this car a very good driver. It's not a 100-point concourse show car. So you could drive this car. You could drive this car and be proud of it, show it, put your kids in it. But you could also go to the grocery store and park it in the back of the lot, of course, but not have to worry too much about it. Now, if you're a perfectionist and you're a restorer, you may want to bring this car even up to another level by stripping this paint and doing it again. It's a very straight, rust-free body. There's never, from what we can see, there's no indication of any previous bodywork on this car at all. The undercarriage is impeccable. You could eat off the floorboards under this car. It's that clean. I wish I knew the history of where this car came from, but there's no possible way this car could have come from a winter type climate. No possible way at all. Very dry and clean. But like I said, paint work could have been done better. The prep and the paint could have been done better. Again, very difficult to portray in the camera. I just want full disclosure that if it had been my car, I would have spent a little bit more time and money prepping this car before I painted it. But again, still very presentable. Interior is beautiful. Nice original seats with no rips or tears. That fold down back seat, the cardboard in the back, the side panels, all very nice. The dashboard, original carpet, somewhat faded, a little tattered. I probably would put a carpet in this car if I was to keep it. And it also is going to need the headliner replaced. We took the headliner down because all the stitching had come loose between the seams, and we took the headliner down, cleaned up the roof, and we did buy a new headliner for the car from Clark's, and it goes to the next owner for install. You're going to ask why I didn't install the headliner. I'm going to tell you right now. Upholstery interior guys in the Boston area are impossible to schedule. Most of them are busy for months on out, and they charge accordingly because they can. Interior work in the Boston area is virtually impossible to get done. There's those gauges. We believe the mileage is original at 67,932. The Massachusetts title that we have shows 67,000 miles as actual miles. Our AM radio's never been changed. 4-speed floor shifter, some original style GM Corvair floor mats. You can see the carpet has a little bit of fading. The car does have front seat belts. Appear to be correct. Fisher body emblems on the buckles. They're probably factory. Oddly, it only has one rear seat belt. You can see that on the passenger side. I pulled the back seat out, figuring I needed to go under there to fish out the other side, and it's not there, and it was never installed. So my assumption is that this car came from the factory only with the front seat belts, and the owner added one seat belt to the rear, presumably maybe because he had one child. I don't know. Easy enough to add another one, or just take that other one out, but I'll leave that for the next owner to decide. They are all GM body by Fisher seat belts, so there's a little bit of a mystery there, but not big of a deal. Again, the body, extremely nice. Very nice. I will show, I'm going to get the car up on a lift later, and I'm going to show pictures of the undercarriage, but it's unbelievable. So we put a lot of money into this car. This car has been in storage for quite some time. Put a lot of money into this car. It would take me way too long to describe to you here the parts that have been replaced, but there's a lot. And I can send any interested party a list of what's been done to this car. I spent a lot of money and time on this car to make this car turnkey and roadworthy so the next owner doesn't have to do virtually anything. A lot of money spent at Clark's Corvair Parts on this car in just the last month and a half. So if you're interested, give me a shout. I'll give you a better breakdown of what's going on, what we did, and I can also send you some pictures and a video of the car running. I don't usually do that here because I keep that separate. I will give anybody that's interested a video of the car running. It runs beautifully, shifts beautifully, turbo kicks in beautifully. The brakes are all brand new. The tires are brand new. Again, the list goes on and on and on. So Orphan Car Garage, I keep things affordable. We're asking $17,900 for this beautiful 1965 Corsa Coupe. Very, very, very nice car. 100% concours condition? No. If it was that, it would be considerably more money. But it's a very, very nice, turnkey, rust-free, reliable driver. So if you like what you see, give me a call, 508-954-8090. Check out my website, orphancargarage.com. Find me on Facebook, because that's where all my new arrivals get posted first, Orphan Car Garage on Facebook. And comment below, subscribe to my page. We always have cool stuff. Always have a Corvair coming or going. My Corvairs don't last. In fact, there's one leaving in a couple hours here for Syracuse that we sold last week. We do a lot of Corvairs. If you know of anybody selling a Corvair, give me a call. I'm always looking for new inventory. So I hope to hear from you. Hope that you subscribe, and I hope you like what you see. Thank you.